Welcome to the Human Athlete Podcast, empowering your life transition beyond sport, while celebrating the whole person behind the athlete. With your hosts, Kelsi Stockert, Steve Moore, and Jaime Komer, powered by Athlete Career Transition. Hey, Kelsi and Steve.
Hey, Jaime. Super excited to be here for this. Can't wait to get going.
Yes, I'm excited to see you both. We are joining together today to share with you, the listener, who we are and what the Human Athlete Podcast is all about. You'll hear about each of our journeys as professional athletes, our personal transition experience, and why each of us are so passionate about empowering the whole human behind the athlete, in particular around this critical time of post-sports retirement. And we'll share with you what you can expect in future episodes, including the unique yet connected themes that each of us will be speaking about and interviewing on. And we'll also hear why and how we celebrate the human behind the athlete. What does it mean to celebrate the human behind the athlete? And what does it look like? All right. So now, Kelsi, Steve, and I, we're all retired from being professional athletes. And now our passions and careers are dedicated to empowering professional athletes on their journey beyond sport. So let's dive right into the beginning part, though. Really I guess you could say what's made us who we are today, or part of what's made us who we are today. Steve, start us off. What was your sporting journey and transition experience like? Let's go there.
Well, I can just about remember it. It was that long ago. But and that's one of the interesting parts about our dynamic, before we go any further, is that we're all at different transition stages. So I am post-sport, 18, coming up to 18 years.
Yes, you are.
I know, Jaime, you're in between myself and Kelsi. And Kelsi, you're right at the beginning of your journey. So it's great that we've got a dynamic like this around the conversations that we're going to have. But my sporting background goes way back to when I was a very, very young boy. My whole family loves sport completely. I was kind of brought up on soccer or football in the UK. And it wasn't until I was age 16 that I actually found the sport that I love today, and the sport that gave me so much in my life and transformed my life, if I'm completely honest. And I fell into rugby a little bit. So you can see that I'm Welsh, and I've managed to have a few significant games in my career. But before those significant games, I was playing soccer as a 16-year-old, broke my ankle, and my dad's best friend was the chairman of the local rugby club, and he'd been badgering my dad to get me down to the club and just to play a little bit of rugby because I was so tall. And he saw his opportunity, and he said, "Right, we've got the best physio, the best trainer in the town. Come and rehab. Come and get yourself ready for the next soccer season. And don't worry about it. You know, we're happy to have you here for the summer." And I went and rehabbed, did my training, did a bit of rugby training. Didn't really enjoy it that much, getting bashed around a bit. And through that period, the players that were there were on to me constantly. You've got to play rugby. You've got to have at least one game. You can't go through the whole preseason without playing one game. So after the relenting pressure of them saying all of that, I gave in and I said, "Yeah, no problem. I'll play one game just to get them off my back." And I played one game. I threw away my soccer boots. After that one game, I scored 4 tries, kicked a load of conversions because I could kick a ball at the time. And that was the start of my rugby journey at 16 years old. And then it was a very quick trajectory from that position of being a 16-year-old skinny kid to 2.5 years later playing for one of the best teams in the country. And somehow I just grew into rugby. And I just love the whole ethos around the game. The values, and Kelsi, I know you're from a rugby family background as well. The values that rugby gave me and continue to give me and my family, my children, were lessons for life. And I go right back to that time and I'm so grateful that I actually broke my ankle playing soccer and ended up on a rugby pitch. And I went on a 14-year career of playing rugby around the world. Played nearly 500 top-class games, played for my country, but it was just such a pleasure to do it, and I managed to get paid for the privilege of doing it, and all I was doing was running around the field with my friends chasing a silly-shaped ball, and I loved every second of it.
Yeah.
And that was that. And then it came to an end. It came to an end through injury, and then the next phase of my life started. And without the background that I had in rugby, the grounding and the values that I'd been taught through that period, I certainly wouldn't be here today doing what I'm doing with you guys. And the next 15, 16, 17 years of my life have been just as enjoyable, slightly more challenging in certain aspects, but just as enjoyable because of the life that rugby gave me pre-retirement. So that's just a very brief overview of where I've come from and my transition journey. And we'll delve more into the actual ups and downs of transition and how you feel around that process and what I did to cope with all of those things that particular time. But yeah, that's a bit of a high level view of where I've come from.
Yeah. Steve, I'm hearing how powerful that experience was of the values and really the family experience that you had with rugby and being able to use it. It sounds like through the ups and downs and kind of figuring it out as you went, how to use that into your life beyond. And so share with us, what fuels that passion for you to empower athletes today and how you do that?
The fuel behind it really is based on my own experiences of how challenging it was when I retired from sport. As I say, I was lucky enough to play international rugby, and when I retired, I thought I could walk into any job and I'd be automatically employable because of the sporting background that I had. And at the time, I didn't realise it, but no one was really interested in employing a rugby player just because I was a rugby player. They wanted to know if I had a degree. They wanted to know if I had work experience. And I went for about 6 to 8 months of applying for jobs, applying for things that I thought I was more than capable of doing, and not even getting replies back in terms of people saying yes, they'd want to have a little interview or chat with me. And it was really difficult, and it was disheartening. It was, for me, I was sort of dumbfounded a little bit as to why I couldn't get what I would thought was a simple job. I wasn't trying to shoot for the stars and be CEO of a business. I just wanted to be part of a team again and be an effective part of that team and help it be successful. And I just couldn't find the right home. And throughout all those challenges, it was friends and family that got me through those really dark times of not knowing who I was, what I could do, what I could achieve. And it wasn't until 7 or 8 years later when I'd built a number of my own businesses and found that I was a good entrepreneur, that I started talking to Andy, my brother, who'd gone through the same challenges as a professional sportsman and then post-sport as well. And we talked about our own transitions. And I think it's no secret that over a night in the pub, we decided to set up a business that was going to do something about it. And I think that's one of the best nights in the pub I've ever had, because I look back on that now, and 10 years on, we've created a global business. So
magic happens in the pub, and we'll dive more into you as the co-founder too, Steve, co-founder of Athlete Career Transition. And let's hear from you, Kelsi, about your sporting journey and the transition experience that you've had, that the new transition, very fresh transition experience you've been having.
Yeah, so my rugby career started back in high school as well. My good friend Deborah, her brother had played rugby, and she was very much your typical rugby player, big, burly, busky girl. And she was like, Kelsi, come out and train with me. I don't have any friends. I want someone to train with. And I was like, all right, cool. I was waiting for track season to start. And I went to one training and I absolutely fell in love with the sport. It is just such a family, a community. And the fact that small, skinny, little, speedy Kelsi can play on the rugby pitch with her big friend Deborah, who's just this powerhouse, and we can empower each other on the field and off the field with the other team. I just instantly fell in love with the sport. So I had my daughter right after high school, and shortly after having her, I realized if I was going to play rugby, I wanted to play at the highest level I could. So when she was about 2.5 years old, I started playing for the Seattle rugby team. So I was driving about 800 miles a week to train with this team just to make it happen. And I had this awesome rugby community behind me down in Olympia who would help me watch my daughter, and they quickly became my family. And I just had so much support. So I drove to Seattle and played with the Seattle rugby team. It was kind of like a waterfall of amazing opportunities when I decided to make that commute and put in that hard work and put in the training. Because with the Seattle rugby team, I quickly became the top try scorer for both men and women's in the BC Premier League, which was a huge, huge accomplishment I never thought I would ever do. We went on to win 2 national championship teams. I got MVP of a tournament one time, and it was just like, all of a sudden, so many amazing opportunities just started falling into my lap. I quickly got picked up by the USA 15s rugby team and got my first cap in 2015, I want to say, or 2014. And played and scored my very first international try against New Zealand, which was just a dream come true. I mean, watching them do the haka just 20 meters away from them was like, oh my gosh, this is real life. This is happening. This is me. And I started at the wing and then I scored against them. I'm sure the only reason why I scored against them is because I was so scared. I just had to run real fast, get to the try zone so the play could be over. And then after that, my first international tour with the 15s team, I got picked up by the 7s team. I started going down to the training center down in Chula Vista, basically once a month for camps to help the 2016 Olympic team prep for the Olympics. So that was just amazing. It was just crazy to be flown down to California once a month to go train with the team and to like look around, and there's Jillian Potter, who's like one of my heroes on and off the rugby pitch, and I'm getting to call her a teammate for a week. And it was surreal. After 2016, the 2016 Olympics, I got offered a contract. So my daughter and my now fiance, Nick, and I moved our whole lives down to San Diego to chase this Olympic dream. It was amazing. It was crazy. It was such an experience. A lot of ups and downs through that. I had to start working at Starbucks on top of training full time, which was amazing to have that opportunity to work at Starbucks. But, after training all day from 6 to 4 p.m., going to work Starbucks till 10 p.m. at night was exhausting. And it was really hard and a taxing time because as an athlete, I always want to be the best. So I was trying to be the best athlete. I was trying to be the best mother, the best employee, and the best student. And it was just a lot. So after about 2 years on the world circuit series with the 7s team, I kind of went into this pretty bad depression, and my anxiety kind of took over. I realized it was just not sustainable. The life I was living wasn't working, and my mental health came first. So I stepped away from the USA 7s team, was still planning on playing with the 15s team. But then I realized shortly after that I still was struggling to just sustain, and I was needing to kind of figure out myself and find out what happiness and what success meant for me off the rugby pitch. So I took a step away from the 15s team, which I thought was going to be only short term, but it ended up being about a year and a half until I officially retired from USA Rugby completely. I just realized my happiness and what success meant to me didn't necessarily line up with rugby anymore. And I was just so grateful for the journey and the opportunities I had, but my goals had changed and my values kind of had shifted into what I wanted with my life. So it took some hard reflections and a lot of ups and downs working through that depressive fog. But I came out on the other side right around the time I started transitioning with ACT and into the role I am at today. So it's kind of been a whirlwind of an experience, but definitely one I couldn't ever take away.
Whirlwind indeed, and one that Kelsi, I want to acknowledge your courage and self-awareness for recognizing what's important to you and recognizing what success means to you, and that courage of putting yourself first in that capacity, saying I need to take care of my body, my well-being, my heart, my mental health. And that's something, just that really speaks to this concept of a human athlete, this whole person. Mm-hmm. And you're already sharing a bit. I imagine this is part of the fuel that gives you passion for, telling people stories, athlete stories, and helping others. How does that resonate with you?
Absolutely. I mean, when I went through my retirement and when I walked away from the team and when I was in that kind of limbo of, am I going to retire? Am I going to go back to the team? It was such a lonely and overwhelming experience. You don't really hear many people talking about retiring from sports. You don't really hear about how athletes do and what they do after sport. And I just felt so alone. I mean, I went from being immersed in a team environment all day, every day, and like living with a team basically, to just being on my own. And it was a weird acceptance period to acknowledge that the team moves on without you, and it was just such a weird and crazy, confusing time, and really dark. And so I have always truly believed that my experiences and what I go through is so I can use this as a way to normalize the conversation and to break the stigma and to just help others and to inspire others. So that's been my biggest drive and my biggest purpose into what I'm doing today is I just want to let other people know, other athletes know that they're not alone after sport. They do have a team after sport, and what they're feeling is okay. And we can utilize everything we learned in sport to push us forward in our lives, and they're not alone. So that is 100% my driving factor behind this nowadays.
Yeah.
Kelsi, look, I really applaud you for highlighting your journey, particularly around depression and your mental health, and because I think that's one of the unseen and unspoken things around sport is, from outside, everyone looks at the physical attributes of athletes and what they achieve on a field. We'll hear from you, Jaime, in a minute about your sporting career, but in a pool, in an Olympic arena, in a huge stadium, everyone's viewing and eyeing that physical being. But when it comes to the mental side, not only of preparing for sports and actually being involved in sport at the very highest level and the highest performing pressure you could feel, but what happens after that when such a big part of your life, because it is all consuming, and that's the other thing that people don't realize. They think you train for a couple of hours a day and then you're off with your friends or your family or doing whatever it is, but it's not. It consumes your life completely, and to the detriment of relationships and your life going forward. You don't get to do the normal things that everyone experiences. You miss out on birthdays, weddings, funerals, mitzvahs, baptisms, everything. And that really is just so that you can be the best that you can be. And it can be a slightly selfish existence at times. But then when you fall off the back of that and you retire and that whole thing that's been consuming your life is gone, there's a massive void in your life. And it's not like leaving a normal job and going to another job. It is such a big part of your life and no one realizes it. And certainly no one from outside of sport really gets it, I don't think. And that's one of the things that we'll be highlighting over the coming weeks and months with this podcast series is that support is necessary, and support is necessary to give athletes the best opportunity to be as successful in their post-career sporting career lives as they have been in their sporting lives as well. And Jaime, I want to hear from you as well about your sporting life and your transition as well, because you're in the middle of me and Kelsi in terms of your transition. I'm obviously the grandfather of this podcast series. And,
that'll be your nickname.
Kelsi's Kelsi's the little puppy running around, all excited.
Young one. Hello.
Yeah. And you have a different perspective from us, don't you?
I do. I'm just kind of right in between 11 years retirement, and hearing both Kelsi, you and Steve talk, it just reminded me of these key themes that were coming up for me in my life, retirement around, having, and what I found in sport, purpose, passion, a very specific lifestyle, a very structured lifestyle. And I played water polo, and I'm so amazed that the three of us play potentially the two most physical sports out there. High intensity sports. I was a professional goalkeeper, so I wasn't as physically interactive with others, except I just had a ball thrown in my head a lot, with the concussions and squish things. I began I grew up in Central California in the United States, and it's really hot there. So during the summers, I tried all these different sports. It was fun, and yet nothing fully clicked. And I started in high school. I tried water polo. My older brothers played. I thought, that'd be fun to try. And it's in the pool because it's so bloody hot outside. And when I did it, something clicked then. I was horrible at it. I didn't know how to tread water. We do something called egg beater. It's like a circular motion, like the egg beater that you might see in a traditional kitchen, I suppose, the tool that you see in a kitchen. And I didn't know how to tread water. And as a goalkeeper, well, you've got to be able to tread water because there's not a bottom usually. So in our pools that we have, though, there's a shallow end. And so I'd go in the shallow end, the 3-foot shallow end. And we didn't have a boys team. I'd play on the boys team my freshman year and just get scored on and scored on and scored on. And And I think it really actually helped me learn just to deal with getting scored on, because, it's a really high pressure role, at least at the elite level, and also at the youth level, even to start. And it's something that I just love, though, is that it's an independent role, yet help me be a part of a team and connect with people in such a fun way. And so it took me from high school to UCLA in California for college, and where we did we did an amazing job there with 3 NCAA championships. I was a 4-time All-American, and I wasn't sure if I was going to keep playing or not. And we had an Australian teammate actually at the time, and she invited people to go over and play in Australia. And I took it very seriously and went over in Australia and played for 2 seasons out there.
Why not?
With the National League out there. Yeah, why not, right? And honestly, at that time, I thought I was done. I thought that the door was closed for the national team with the USA team. And my Australian teammate came through again, and she's like, well, why don't you just reach out to the coach? And I thought, oh, it's that simple, huh? You just ask, and maybe you can try out. Let's see what happens. And I did. I reached out, took initiative, and was able to try out, and was able to get on the team after the 2004 Olympics. So it was 2005, and was on and off training, and we played during the summer, and it was such a dream. And at the same time, immediately, I noticed I started having pretty intense performance anxiety. It was pretty much at the beginning of my sporting career. I had ups and downs through it, and I loved the opportunity to play and represent my country and be able to travel the world. I have a big travel bug. It was such a joy. And at the same time, I started having a lot of internal anxiety, and I probably suppressed, I'm guessing, 95% of my emotions. I just didn't feel comfortable being myself in the sporting community because I'm a sensitive human being, so to speak. I'm really in touch with feelings, emotions, intuition. And I thought as an athlete that that's not what I'm supposed to be, that I'm supposed to be hardcore. I'm not supposed to, grimace at my injuries. I had, surgeries on my shoulders and hips and concussions, and I didn't feel comfortable talking about it either. And so when I retired, I was ready to retire. I was emotionally burnt out, physically burnt out. And at the same time, I was really grateful for the career I had. I went to the 2008 Olympic Games. We earned a silver medal there. We earned 2 world championships. I mean, it was amazing. Thank you. Woo! And it was at the time, though, because of the mental health stuff going on that I didn't know how to process. I didn't know what to do with. I didn't really celebrate myself in that way. I actually was quite shameful of my experience because I was also a backup goalie for the Olympics. And I literally believed I was a backup in my life. I just thought that. And so it's almost like that feeling like you're not enough, that feeling like you're constantly not enough. So you're always striving for more.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Jaime, you're hitting on all of my heartstrings are just getting played right now. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yes, I feel you so deeply on all of that. Oh, right. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Thank you. And the funny part is, right, we take that in transition into our life. So I took that into my roles as I was teaching yoga and Pilates and spin. And I was working with professional athletes. I was teaching yoga and wellness to Major League Baseball athletes, to Olympic and Paralympic athletes. I was teaching nutrition and then coaching. I was coaching and guiding people in lifestyle practices and empowerment practices. And through that journey, little did I know I was really healing myself at the same time. My body, my physical health, my gut health, and my mindset, the way I talk to myself, my relationship with myself. I thought I was just wanting to learn more and teach people and empower people, but it's really actually also a self-learning, self-healing process. That was really vulnerable. Yeah, that really required me to be more vulnerable with myself, which was, again, as an athlete, not the easiest thing to do, to be vulnerable, which we'll get into as well. Yeah. Oh. So that's a snippet of the journey.
Yeah, sorry, Jaime. I just wanted to touch on one point that you brought up there, and that was the fact that even though you were in an Olympic team at an Olympics going for medals, that you still felt that you were a failure. That's right. To lots of people that will sound absolutely crazy. And how could you think that of yourself when you're in such a position? But that's a lot to do with the mindset of an athlete, because you set yourself such specific goals and you have such high expectations of yourself. When you don't reach those goals that you've set for yourself, you beat yourself up. And I did it many times where I didn't actually make a team that I wanted to play in, or I got dropped from a situation and wasn't part of a squad, and and so I was like, I'm a failure, and it wasn't until post sport, looking back on it, I was going, why were you thinking like that? You were lucky enough to do all these amazing things, but when you're in the middle of it, you're going, I haven't achieved anything here. I've set this goal and I've not got to achieve it, and you beat yourself up, and that's part of that is good because it drives you on to succeed, but part of it plays on your mental health, and it's it's a challenge every day. You've got a little angel on your shoulder going, you're amazing, you're awesome, and then you've got a little devil going, you're rubbish. Why haven't you achieved this? Why haven't you done that? And it's a constant battle, isn't it?
It is.
I think it's so funny that you say that, Steve, because I'm really just now getting to that position where I'm looking back on my career and I'm like, all right, Kelsi, like you actually did some pretty awesome stuff. You made such a great name for yourself on the field and off the field as a mental health advocate. Like, go on, like you did good. And it's such a relieving feeling. And I think that's like part of, me clawing myself out of this depressive fog is like kind of that self-recognition, that awareness that is like, while I was in sport, I struggled really being present in the moment. And I was always thinking I should be here. I need to be at this team. I need to make this one. I need to be playing this much amount of time. But now to be, looking back, like, wow, I did really good. It's such a refreshing feeling. And that's what I always, when some young rugby girls on the USA team are coming to me for some advice, I'm like, just be present, like enjoy the moment for what it is. 100%. And like when it's not what you want, just accept it for what it is and know that that's happening for a reason kind of thing. But it's cool that you noted that because I'm like, I'm finally there, which is so refreshing.
But just before we move on, Jamie, just one little anecdote from me about when I first realised that what I'd done in my sporting life was really powerful, and it was the first job that I ever had outside of sport. And it was a great guy who took me on board. He interviewed me for about 30 minutes, an hour. And it was a favour that he was doing for my dad. He knew my dad, and my dad had a chat with him, and he said, listen, can you just get him in and do something with him because he's struggling a little bit here. So he interviewed me for about 30 minutes, an hour, and he actually took me on board, which was great. And I went on to do a cold calling sales job, and after about 2 weeks, he came to me and he said, Steve, can you stop doing what you're doing? I said, why, what's the matter? He said, you're rubbish at this, can you stop it? So I was like, okay, I'll stop doing what I'm doing. And he said, but however, in the first 30 seconds that I met you, you had something about you. And I knew that you had something that I could work with. So what I'd like you to do is just follow me on my business journey. I'll teach you how to work with accountants, work with the bank, set up things with new customers, work with clients, work with whoever it is to get your business up and running. He said, I think you could be an entrepreneur, which was great. So I followed him around, and we went to loads of different meetings. I remember coming out of one meeting, and he stopped me. He said, I've got to say something to you now. And it's a little bit brutal, but I think you'll understand what I'm talking about. And he said, if I hear you talk about your rugby career again, and you say, I only had 3 caps for Wales, because I played 3 times for Wales, I'm going to punch you in the face. I said, what are you talking about? I'm going to punch you in the face. He said, I've never met someone who is so unbelievably humble about what he's done in his life. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, you've played rugby at the highest level for 15 years. You played for your country. He said, how many times has anyone ever played for Wales? And at the time, less than 1,000 men had played men's rugby for Wales, right? The highest honour you can have in our sport. So I said, about 980 people. He said, right, and you're one of those 980 people in 130 years of rugby history in Wales. I said, yeah. He said, well, just think about that. And next time you go into a room and someone asks you about your rugby career, tell them what you've done. Don't apologise for what you've done. Tell them about it. Right. And that was a massive turning point for me in terms of accepting what I'd done in my sporting career was actually quite amazing, but also then being able to turn that into something I could use in a business sense. Yeah, and that was a massive learning curve for me. And he's very good friends with me today, and I still thank him and buy him the odd beer for helping me and mentoring me on my transition through from sport to business.
Oh, and I'm hearing that is literally what athlete career transition. I can see how athlete career transition is, what it is today because of that experience that you've had. And and this theme around for all of us, it's about, being your best, not the best. Because if we get hung up on being the best, this is where we kind of put a noose around our neck. We're just like, and never enough in that context.
Yeah.
But I'm hearing like the shift of being our best and what that looks like. And I think that's a big theme around being the human athlete. And so
100%.
looking at that, looking at that, let's get a sneak peek into what these episodes might look like for us. We're each hosting individual episodes. Today we're here together. We'll be interviewing people. And so starting off, Kelsi, what are you excited to talk about? What are some of those themes that you really want to talk about in these episodes?
Yeah, so my goal is to talk with athletes and kind of start normalizing that conversation behind retirement, learning about their beginning transition, how they started to realize, okay, this is my next chapter in life. I need to walk away from sport, because there's so many different versions, I guess, of retirement. Either it's caused by injury, mental health, or you're wanting just to move on with the next stage in your life. There's just so many different stories. So I really hope to speak with a variety of athletes from different levels, different sporting backgrounds, and kind of learn more about their retirement and why they started their transition and how they got through those dark times. Because the more athletes I speak with, the more I realize we all go through this dark and lonely time, and there's no reason why we need to feel alone. So kind of my goal to create some resources for athletes looking to transition and looking to retire, so they can feel like they have a team after sport.
Yeah, I'm hearing that theme of belonging again, that theme of coming together. Okay, I'm not alone in this. Like, I have what I need here. Yes. Powerful.
Exactly.
Yes.
Thank
I'm excited
you.
for those. Steve, how about yourself? What are you excited to talk about here on the Human Athlete Podcast?
Right. Okay. Well, as you alluded to earlier, Jamie, I'm the co-founder of Athlete Career Transition, and my main role with the business is to work with companies and corporates and business environments that athletes could easily transition into, and to build programs that are sustainable and give athletes an amazing landing space to transition into for their first role, or maybe their fifth or sixth role. We work with athletes who haven't just retired from sport, but all the way through. And one of the things I want to do with the conversations I'll be having is talking to business leaders about, one, their own experiences of sport, because many business leaders have had a sporting interest in their life or a sporting career behind them. So where they've come from and how that's influenced their business lives. But also I want to dispel some of the untruths around athletes coming into business. The fact that athletes are looked upon with no relevant work experience when they first apply for a job or go for an interview, when potentially they've performed at the very highest level under the most pressure in a high performing environment for 10, 15 years, and they've been to 4 Olympics and they've got medals around their neck. And to get to that point, you've got to plan, you've got to be analytical, you've got to be prepared to fail, you've got to have a teamwork ethic, you've got to be disciplined, you've got to be dedicated, you've got to have humility, you've got to have courage. And I can go on and on and on about all of the characteristics and traits that make athletes what they are. But not only that, they can transfer the majority of those skill sets and those learned skills in sport into the business environment. And I want to go through how that works, how it looks, and why business find that so interesting. And the businesses that we work with are able to convert athletes from that sporting field into their own businesses in a really tangible way, and give athletes career pathways, not just jobs, but pathways they can be passionate about and have a real purpose for in their life again. And one of the key things really for transition success is having something to go to. So when you retire from sport, if you've got nothing to go to, that's when all of those dark thoughts start to happen, when all of the doubts set in about who you are, what you're about, what your values are. And if you've actually got something to go to with purpose, and there's some place that values who you are and what you've already achieved, a lot of those things dissipate, and they can be worked on in a far easier fashion. And that's where you come in, Jamie, with the work that you do. But I'll be talking to business leaders about how we can find amazing environments for athletes.
Yes, and I'm hearing that you're focusing on more than just, supporting athletes financially by it's not just a job, it's a career. I mean, you're talking about that purpose piece, that values piece, that connection. And it sounds like you're going to be really empowering everybody listening from this perspective. I think business can feel really confusing for an athlete. The idea of moving into any type of work. It's like, I'm sorry, what is that? Is that the real world? That phrase.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The real world.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah. And it's, for athletes, it's firstly realizing what the assets they've already got, and what they've developed in sport. And then once they've realized that builds the confidence that they can actually go and be really productive and impactful very, very quickly in a business environment. And then it's having the right business environment for them to go into, with the right support around it, not just from the business perspective, but from an ACT perspective, and giving that individual a long-term vision of where they could be in 3, 5, 10 years' time. So it's about finding a career path where they can be passionate about and not just a job.
Steve, you really just touched on acknowledging that, we have the skills and strengths inside of us that we can use and adapt into our life now that we have now after retirement in transition. And that's something that I'll really be speaking to as well in my episodes. I think I want to be able to help that you have what you need inside of you. And we also have people who have amazing tools to share. So I think of transition like an adventure. And I want to help us change the way we see transition. So instead of an ordeal, it's an adventure. And what do we need for an adventure? We need tools. We need to have a vague idea of where we're going to start. We need clarity. And it really helps, like you said, Kelsi, to know that you're not alone on your adventure. And so in my episodes, I'll be really speaking around the holistic piece that around well-being, all the aspects that impact our well-being after retirement during this time where there could be so much pressure, so to speak. You can think of transition like you're opening a door and you're not quite in the other door yet, and you're in a really squishy hallway. So in these episodes that I'll be sharing, I'll be interviewing a variety of people that can offer tools. So whether that's a neuroscientist or whether that's an athlete, a professional athlete who's gone through this experience, we all have tools to share. And I'd love to offer that kind of that big lens, that holistic lens, so we can all walk away learning a little bit more about ourselves, whether it's through our own personal transition or whether we know someone who's going through a transition so we can better support them if we're working with athletes, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you touched on something there, Jaime, around transition being viewed as an adventure. And my view on transition is that it's not one event in your life. It's not one period of your life. We're constantly transitioning. I still feel that I've got so much to learn. I've made many mistakes in my life. I'm at an age now where I'm making less mistakes because I've made so many. So I've ticked them off. So I've learned along the way. But transition is something that happens consistently. And I transitioned out of sport 17 years ago. It's probably, I don't know, I think maybe 5 or 6 years ago that I actually realized that my transition out of sport had morphed into something else. And I realized I couldn't compete at the level I used to. I was sat watching a game of rugby with Andy, my brother. Wales were playing England, which is one of the big clash games in the Six Nations over here with rugby. And it was just the most brutal game of rugby I'd ever sat and watched. You could hear the hits and the collisions from the stands, and there was 75,000 people there. And at the end of the game, me and Andy sat in a bit of silence for a couple of minutes, looked at each other and said, we couldn't do that anymore. There's no way we could. And we realized at that point that our transition from sport had come to an end. We were now supporters again, and we weren't hankering after still playing. We weren't thinking about the good old days. We go, right, actually, we're in a good place in terms of our own business lives. We're in a good place personally, and we don't need to be worrying about still playing rugby anymore or still wanting to be part of that environment. We'd moved on. And, as the years have gone on, my transition is now into what I'm doing as a businessman and how I'm creating what I do with ACT and ensuring that that's building for the future and growing and offering more and more athletes the opportunity to experience transition in a different way than I did. And that's all I can do.
Well, I think it's just so amazing. And I'm so excited that we as a group are kind of highlighting this transition and this as a whole is because as an athlete, you view retirement as like, that's the end. That's it. And when you're going through that beginning stages of retirement, you feel like it's almost the end and you're like, who am I without rugby? Who am I without sport? And it's this like crazy journey, and it feels so overwhelming, and it feels like the end. But in reality, it's just like, this is just the beginning of a huge transition in your life. And that is why I'm so glad we are highlighting that, because it's like, it's not over, athletes. It's not like, boom, you retire and that's it. It's, you can use these skills and everything you've gone through and begin this transition, because it is a lifelong kind of transition, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's an ongoing process. And Steve, you honed in on that, and Kelsi, you as well. It's an ongoing experience, and it's unique to each of us. And I'm really excited that in the Human Athlete podcast is really honoring that each person is unique. So each person is going to gain, their own tools and take what they really, resonate with. And we're looking at this as, again, a big picture, the whole human athlete. Let's go there. Well, what is the human athlete? What does that mean to celebrate the human behind the athlete?
Absolutely, and one of the things that is really important for everyone to realize is that an athlete isn't just a number that's of someone that's retired from sport. They're individuals. They've got their own needs, their own challenges, their own skill sets, and the Human Athlete podcast will highlight all of that in glorious Technicolor, hopefully, and it will also highlight how athletes can utilize all those skill sets and characteristics that they've built up in years in sport, and give them confidence to move forward with their lives in terms of looking at opportunities in a different way, rather than having to do something, but wanting to do something. And I think what we'll do through this series will be a real step forward in terms of an understanding and putting together a bit of a roadmap for people as well.
Yeah, powerful.
Yeah, and I hope this becomes kind of a resource for even competing athletes to start thinking about what is life after sport? Who am I without sport? And even just that little bit of knowledge, because I've already spoken with many athletes, and they always wished they would have started thinking about life after sport a little sooner. And that's something I kind of wish I would have done as well. So I hope this really inspires those current competing athletes to just have that in the back of their mind, that sport isn't forever, and transition out of sport doesn't have to be a scary negative thing, that it can be something worth celebrating and something you can use to empower yourself to move forward in your life.
Yeah.
100%.
And by celebrating the whole human, the person behind the athlete, knowing that we are more than an athlete, I think makes that transition easier in that context too. It makes it, okay, I'm moving on just the next step in my life. Okay, I'm not just nobody now, right? I'm still me. Who am I? I'm me. Okay, and I already know a bit about who I am.
Yeah.
Awesome. We already feel a little more of that confidence there.
How can I redirect these goals and this hard work and work right into my new goals? And what is that new definition of success? What is that new definition of happiness? Absolutely.
You nailed it. You nailed it, Kelsi. And so as we wrap up today, what do you feel like is one thing that you want every athlete to know when they're thinking about their own transition? Kelsi, what do you think?
Kelsi, you go first.
I think the biggest takeaway I hope athletes walk away from this podcast is that they're not alone, that this journey through transition doesn't have to be dark and scary, and you have people and resources to reach out to make that transition a little easier. That's my biggest hope for this podcast.
Beautiful. How about you, Steve?
Well, in true Steve fashion, I'm going to give 3 pieces of advice rather than one. That all kind of merge into each other anyway. And it's something that I picked up from someone else, so I can't take full credit, but I'll take credit for amplifying it. And it's really from a lady who I listened to a couple of weeks back, just preparing to do these podcast series, just listening to what other people are doing and talking about. And the lady's name is Frances Edmonds, and she's a longevity and well-being fellow from Stanford University. And she's just written a book called Repotting Your Life, and it's about individuals in their midlife going through a transition of some description, or midlife crisis, she called it, but I would term it slightly differently. And she came up with 3 things around that transition in midlife, which I think can be applied to athletes as well. And she called them the 3 H's. humility, humanity, and humor. And she said, with humility, yes, be proud of what you've achieved already, but starting again is not a scary place. You can use all those skill sets if you're humble enough to look back with pride on what you've done in the right way. She said about humanity, having openness, respect, love, and inclusiveness. And if you have inclusiveness as a policy in your life, then diversity will be the outcome from that. And then humor. And I think you already know that I like to have a joke and a laugh occasionally and bring some smiles to people's faces. And having the ability to laugh at yourself as well is super important. And you can't change the facts of your life, but you can change how you look at them and view them. And I always look back on everything I've done with a sense of fun and a sense of humor as well. So the 3 H's: humility, humanity, and humor.
The 3 H's. Yes. Love it. Thank you, Steve. And I feel the one thing that I'd like to share with, just let every athlete know is, I know it's easy to look outside for answers, especially as an athlete, we're often told, we're often guided, we have coaches, we have mentors, we have physical therapists, people to help us with recovery, maybe nutritionists. There's people who help us, and they're so powerful. That support is so powerful. And I want every athlete to know that you also have you. That you have you can go inward to be with your heart, in other words, to listen to your heart. And sometimes that heart will take you in a completely other direction and than maybe what you think you should do, what you think social expectations expect of you. Listen to your heart. It knows. It knows best. It knows you the best. And that's something I'd like you to leave you with. And that's something I hope that in this space, this Human Athlete podcast, that you feel more connected to your heart, your intuition, who you are, your core self. Yeah. That's it.
I love that. Jane.
Very
That's
good.
So powerful. So powerful.
Thanks.
So good.
Well, this is such
and it's really, you nailed it. It's really hard as an athlete. Oh, sorry.
Please.
Oh, I was just saying you really nailed it as in the sense of it is really hard to look inward as an athlete because you do have so many sources outwards, and that is just so powerful to look inward and to really have that courage to follow your heart. So I respect and appreciate you bringing that to the space so much. And I'm so excited to see who you bring and chat with on these podcasts. And I'm excited to listen so I can take some good stuff away as well, going through my own transition. So thank you, Jamie.
Yeah. Well, and as we share, we all have
all
things
learn
to
something. The 3 of us, as well as everyone else. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, we all have things to learn. As you shared, Steve, we all are still, transition is an ongoing experience, right? Whether we're new or whether we've been retired for 11 or 18 years. We all have things to learn because we're always growing and we're always evolving, and that's part of the adventure. So that here we are at the Human Athlete Podcast, and we thank you for listening today. Stay tuned for more. Kelsi, Steve, so amazing to be here together with you.
Thanks, Jamie.
Yes, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us today on the Human Athlete Podcast. To learn more, we invite you to visit www.athletecareertransition.com. See you next time.